Hello, once again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our virtual classroom. Today, we're going to continue working with percentages. Specifically looking at word problems and how to figure out a percentage. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to figure out a percent from any fraction. From any fraction, you'll be able to change that fraction into an equivalent ratio that is a percent. And so the first thing that I want you to remember is that a percent, ladies and gentlemen, any percent can be written as a fraction over 100. And so that's really what I'm showing you right here, that the number goes, for any percent, for example, if you have something like 3%, 3%, ladies and gentlemen, is the same thing as 3 over 100. Or if you have something like 12%, 12% would be the same thing as 12 over 100, right? So it's just that number over 100. And really, the percentage is always going to be equivalent to some fraction that is a part over a whole or part over the total. For example, in a pizza, it's usually out of 8 pieces. And let's say that you ate 2 of them. So 2/8 is equivalent to what over 100? That's how you would figure out what percentage 2 is out of 8. And so you'll see some examples of that in a little bit. And really, what I want you to have in mind is this pattern right here. Okay, whether it is the percent, some number over 100 is equal to a part over a whole, or the part over the whole is equal to some percentage over 100, some number over 100. It doesn't matter which fraction goes first, as long as they're equivalent to each other. Because at the end of the day, if you set them up correctly, regardless of which method you use, you're going to be on the right track. The most important step is to make sure that you set these up correctly. All right, so let's start with an example. So let's say that you have a fraction, and that fraction is 7/20. 7/20. Let me zoom in right here. So we have 7/20, and let's suppose that this represents, I don't know, Halloween is coming up, and a lot of people like to go trick-or-treating, and let's say that 7 is the part of houses out of 20 houses. So that's the ratio of number of houses that actually give out candy or something like that. So 7/20, that is our fraction, that is our part over our whole. So 7 out of 20, that is our ratio. And we want to know, what percentage is this? Let's change this fraction into a percentage. So you can say to somebody, hey, this percent of houses actually give out candy in our neighborhoods. All right, well, firstly, notice how I set this up. I put the part over the whole. Okay, 20 is our whole. That is going to be equivalent to some percentage, which is going to be 100%. You always have the whole on the bottom along with the 100%. And the part is always going to be some actual percentage, a part out of 100. And so that actually takes us to our step number 1. Ladies and gentlemen, regardless of which method you decide to use to solve these kinds of problems, you always want to make sure that you line up the equivalent ratios. Okay, so we have a part over a whole is equal to something over 100 because we're looking for the percentage. Now, observe how you can already solve this problem by simply using what we call scale factors. Okay, you can ask yourself, 20 times what number will get to 100? Well, 20 times 5 is equal to 100, which means that if I multiply the 7 by the same scale factor, which in this case is 5, that's going to create an equivalent ratio, in this case, something over 100. So I'm multiplying 20 times 5 because 20 times 5 is 100, and 7 times 5 is 35. 35 over 100 is equal to 35%, because the percentage is always over 100. So that means that 35% of the homes have candy. Can I always use this method? Well, yes. It's not always the easiest method to use, but in this case, why not? I can just take this fraction, multiply by 5, and it will be over 100. That works. 35 over 100 is the exact same thing as 7/20. They are equivalent, so why not use it? Now, what we're going to do here is I'm going to teach you a different method that you can use, just in case this method doesn't work, or is not as easy, okay? Because as we've seen in the past, it's not always as easy as multiplying by the same number. And so again, both methods work, but I'm going to show you a different method that you can use, a different tool. So again, with this new method, the first step is exactly the same. We're going to line up the fractions. So I have my part over a whole right here. and I have something over 100. I'm looking for that something. I need to know what number over 100 is equivalent to 7/20. All right. Now that I have that, step number 2, ladies and gentlemen, is I am going to cross multiply. Okay, cross multiply. What do I mean by that? Well, ladies and gentlemen, we know that these two ratios are going to be equivalent, right? And so we know that we can cross multiply. So I'm going to multiply 7 times 100. So 7 times 100, that goes down here, and 20 times something. Now, I don't know what that something is, so I'm just going to use a P right here. Okay, but 20 times something should be equal to whatever 7 times 100 is, because we want these ratios to be equivalent. So again, ladies and gentlemen, all I'm doing is I'm building an equation. I'm basically just bringing down the equal sign. And on one side, I'm going to have this cross product. So that's going to be 7 times 100. And on the other side, I'm going to have 20 times P. And if it looks a little weird, it's going to become easier later on. It's going to make more sense later. All right, so yes, we know that 7 times 100 is 700, so that's where that came from. And 20 times P is just 20 times P, right? So on one side I have 700, and on the other side I have 20P. All right. And then my third step, ladies and gentlemen, so we just multiplied. Now we're going to divide. We're going to divide both sides of the equation by the number next to the letter. So notice how the letter is right here, and the number next to the letter is 20. So that means that I need to divide by 20. So I'm going to divide. I'm going to use a fraction to show division. So I'm going to divide by 20. And I'm going to divide both sides by 20. So 20 divided by 20 is just cancels out. 700 divided by 20, ladies and gentlemen, gives me 35. So again, 700 divided by 20, I work it out. That's going to give me 35. So that means that P is equal to 35. We get the same answer. Notice how over here, when I multiplied by 5, I got 35. Over here, whenever I divided both sides by 20, I got 35. I get the same exact answer. Again, that may have seemed a little confusing to some of you guys. You might be thinking, Mr. Lugo, once I set it up, why can't I just multiply by 5 and I still get 35? Well, you're right. I would have done it that way. I would have multiplied by 5. But again, I'm just showing you a different method that you can use, because as you're going to see in the next example, it's not always going to be super easy to just multiply by 5. Okay, it's not going to be just multiplying by some whole number to get to 100 and then do the same thing to the numerator. Okay, so in the interest of that, let me just quickly recap what we just did. So number 1, we set it up. Okay, that's going to be true no matter what. You're always going to line up the part over the whole is equivalent to some number over 100, because we're looking for the percent. Number 2, ladies and gentlemen, we cross multiplied. Okay, so we did 7 times 100, which gave us 700, so that goes on that side, and 20 times P, which gives us 20P, so that goes on that side. All right, and then once I cross multiplied, my final step is always to divide. So we're always going to divide by the number next to the letter, so we're going to divide by 20. All right, so 700 divided by 20, and that gave me my answer. So not too bad. Set it up, cross multiply, divide. So let's look at a harder problem. Okay, so this time, ladies and gentlemen, we have this problem right here. 18 is what percent of 96? 18 is what percent of 96? Well, first of all, looking at the question, notice that it's asking what percent. Notice that we're not given a percentage. We're given 18 and we're given 96, but neither of those is a percentage. And the question is literally asking what percent. In other words, what is the percent? So we're looking for the percent. And we remember that a percent is always some number over 100. All right, so I'm lining it up. That's my first step. I'm looking for what over 100 is equivalent to the part over the whole. 18 out of 96. Now, how do I know that 18 is the part? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to remember that the part is always going to be associated with the word is. And that part is always a part of your whole. So it's going to be is over of. Is over of. 18 is a part of 96. So that's my part. This is my whole. Notice how the whole is always down here with the 100%, because the whole is always 100%. And the percentage is always the part. Now, do not assume that the part is always less than the whole. It is possible to have more than 100% of something, but usually the part is less than the whole, but not always. Okay, so we lined it up. So step number 2, we need to cross multiply. So let's go ahead and cross multiply. So we're going to have 100 times 18. So 100 times 18 is 1,800. When you're multiplying by 100, guys, you just write down the number and then add 2 zeros. So that's 1,800. And the other cross product is going to be 96 times P. Sorry. So 96 times P is just 96. So there we go. On either side of the equal sign, on one side we have 1,800, on the other side we have 96P. It technically doesn't matter on which side as long as you're multiplying the right numbers. So cross multiply. 100 times 18, 1,800. 96 times P is just 96P. Because at the end, guys, we're just going to divide both sides by what? The number next to the letter. So where's the letter? It's right here. So we're going to divide by 96. So we divide 1,800 by 96. And so 1,800 goes on the inside. 96 goes on the outside, and we divide, and I just gave it to you because I don't want to waste time. So that would give us 18.75. That is P. That's the number that goes over 100. And since it's 18.75 over 100, that's 18.75%. Now, before you start saying, Mr. Lugo, that seems kind of complicated. Let's first review it. So again, we lined it up. Part over whole, part over 100. We cross multiplied. So we just did 1,800 on one side, 96P on the other. And then we divided by 96 because that is the number next to the letter. So 1,800 divided by 96. And then that's the only real math that we have to do. We divide, and that gave us our answer. Consider the alternative. What if we try to use scale factors? Well, 96 times what number will give me 100? How would I get from here to here? Even, I don't know, you would have to divide 100 by 96, and that's going to give you some long decimal, and then you have to multiply. Notice that multiplying by some common number would not really work in this one. It is possible, but notice how in this particular problem, that's way more complicated. Now, are all the problems going to be this complicated? No, and in fact, the problems in our assignment that follows these notes are actually quite simple, but I do want you to see that in this case, multiplying by a common factor is actually a little bit harder. So remember that you can always line it up, cross multiply, and then divide. We will be covering this more and more. I promise you that the more we do it, the easier it's going to get. So for now, just know that this is another tool that you can use. And for most problems, if it's easier to just multiply by a common number, then just do that. But with that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, here's another tool in your tool chest. And I hope that you will find it useful later. And with that in mind, I will see you next time.